There are so many FPV drones out there on the market. Do you need a more beginner drone or a more advanced drone? How much should you be spending on an FPV drone? What's the price difference? And most importantly, what is the best drone for you? I'm here to save you a ton of time when you're picking the best FPV drone for yourself. Let's do it. My name is Danny Mcgee, and if you're new here, I fly FPV drones for a living. I fly big drones, small drones, drones that are great for mountain diving, drones that are great for indoor flying, and just everything in between. Now, one of the problems with FPV, and I especially found this when I was first getting into it, is there are so many options. When I first got into FPV, I was so confused on which drone to get. So my goal with this video is just to talk about each and every drone that I own, talk about what it's good at doing, what it's bad at doing, who it's good for, who it's not good for, and everything that you need to know about each one. All of the drones that I'll be talking about are bind and flies, so you literally just take them out of the box, link them up, and you're ready to get in the air. How I'm gonna do this is basically break everything down by price point, because honestly, that's one of the biggest limiting factors when it comes to drones, because they can get pretty expensive. The first one I wanna talk about is the Beta FPV Aquila 16. It basically just comes as part of a kit, so you get the drone, goggles, and a controller that you can use for the simulator, and it all only costs 250 bucks. This drone is a CineWhoop, so it's basically just meant for flying in your backyard, around your house. You can't put a GoPro on it, so you're not gonna get any crazy cinematic shots, but you're gonna actually get some experience flying FPV. The good thing about this drone is that you can basically spend 250 bucks, get everything you need to get into the air, fly around, and just make sure that FPV is something that you're definitely gonna wanna get into. In my opinion, you're definitely gonna get addicted and want to upgrade later on, but it's a really cheap way to start. Yeah guys, so the reason you're hearing from me right now in my hotel room in Costa Rica is because actually after I completed my initial testing of the Aquila 16, everything went great, but I did do some further tests and it kinda just fell apart. I'd start losing connection like 10 to 15 feet away from myself, and sometimes it would just randomly fly off in these crazy directions. So I reached out to Beta FPV on what the problem is, and they told me to completely take apart the drone and just make sure everything was plugged in correctly. But the reason that I'm recommending a CineWhoop drone is because it's for beginners, and if you're a beginner, you're not gonna wanna do that. For full transparency, Beta FPV did send me the drone for free to include in a video, so they're definitely not gonna be super stoked about this. But at the end of the day, this channel is for you guys, and my main goal is to just provide truthful, honest commentary on products. After that, I did a bunch of research and talked to a bunch of people about what the best CineWhoop is that's out there. So the one that I can recommend is the Beta FPV Cetus X. It has a ton of really good reviews and seems to be much more durable than the Aquila 16. And it's basically the exact same thing where you get the full kit. So now let's get into the next drone. Okay, so after this drone, you're getting to the point where you're going to need a good pair of goggles and a controller. In this video, I'm mainly going to be talking about drones. I have another video where I got super depth into all the differences between goggles and controllers, but for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna give you my top recommendations to keep it simple. If you do wanna watch that video though, I'll leave a link up here. And the reason that I recommend the components that I do is because they are the easiest ones out there and they're really solid quality. You literally just get them, link them to your drone, and you're good to go. But to keep it simple, right now, I recommend the DJI Goggles 2 and the DJI FPV Controller 2. DJI recently released a version 3 of both of these things right here, but currently, it's not compatible with the O3 air units, which is basically a little component in each one of these drones that connects the drone to the goggles and the controller. DJI is working on making the V3 version of both of these compatible with O3, but it's just not available right now. I'm filming this video in July of 2024, so if you are watching this video at a later date and you look it up and you do see that the V3 goggles are compatible with O3, go ahead and get those. That's what I'll be recommending because the range is a little bit upgraded and just the video quality that you see when you're flying is better as well. As far as price points, they're pretty similar right now between the 3s and the 2s for both components really. You can expect to be spending about $450 for the Goggles 2, $500 for the Goggles 3, and about 200 bucks for either of these controllers. And if you do get the 2s, don't worry, like you're gonna be able to use those for a really long time. They're great goggles and controller setup. The range is amazing. You're really never gonna find a situation where you're gonna need to go farther than the range. And these things just last years and years and years. All right, let's move on to more drones. So later in this video, I'm gonna be talking about my bigger drones like my Helion 10. But for now, I'm gonna start off with my best pick for beginners. And the number one drone that I would get if I was a beginner right now is the DJI Avata 2. This is the newest FPV drone from DJI, and honestly, it's kind of a beast. This thing only costs $489, which is the cheapest drone on this entire list, and because it has a really solid camera on it, you don't need to buy a GoPro to attach to it to get really good shots. And even though it is my number one pick for beginners, I use this a ton in professional shoots. The Avata 1 camera honestly wasn't that great, but there was a huge upgrade with the Avata 2, so yeah, you're gonna be able to get really good shots. On top of that, this thing is insanely durable because it's all one body. It's not like a bunch of separate pieces. You can just crash the crap out of this thing. Like, I have absolutely hauled ass into the ground with this thing and it was totally fine. And when you're beginning, you're gonna crash. It's just like, that's how FPV is. You're definitely gonna crash. With some of the other drones, if you crash, you might break something, break a prop, something goes wrong, and you don't wanna have to be making repairs all the time. The range on this thing is also insane. I just did a range test and I got out to 2.6 miles. And for a drone that's supposed to be more of like a CineWhoop style drone, that is completely insane. And any of these small CineWhoop drones that I'm gonna be talking about are great for indoors or like flying close to people just because they have prop guards, so you're not gonna like chop someone's leg off trying to get a sick shot. But honestly, this thing doesn't handle that differently from some of my more powerful 5-inch FPV drones. You can't go quite as fast, but you can still do a bunch of really cool freestyle with it, and I don't really feel that limited by it. And just as a quick note here, guys, if you are curious how I color grade my footage to get that really nice cinematic look, I have a pack of 4 LUTs that I sell that I've literally used for everything for the past 4 years. So if you do want to check those out, there's a link down in the description below. Okay, so all the drones I'm going to talk about next will require you to put an action camera on top to get really good footage. And if you're someone looking to make money from FPV, I would definitely recommend using a GoPro or action camera. The Avata 2 is really solid and I do use it sometimes for professional shoots, and you can actually mount a GoPro on top of it and it still flies pretty well. I use and recommend the GoPro Hero 12 just because, in my opinion, you get the best color, you get the best resolution, frame rate, and just the customer support is amazing. And I would say like 95% of my commercial work is shot on GoPro. All right, so let's talk about my CineWhoops first. Like I mentioned, they're basically just my smaller drones that have prop guards. Both of them are sub 250 grams. Now, if you're not familiar with drone laws, basically if you have any drone that is under 250 grams, you're kind of exempt from certain rules like flying over crowds or roads. So a lot of the times I fly for concerts and I have to have a drone that's under 250 grams to be able to legally do that. The first one that I use is the Defender 25 from iFlight. This comes in at $550. This thing also sits right at 250 grams, so if you do put a GoPro on top of it, with these smaller drones, you need to use a naked GoPro, which is basically just a GoPro that's kind of been stripped down and made to be really light. So you're over 250 grams if you do use a GoPro, but the shots straight out of this camera are good enough. When I'm not flying over crowds and I'm using this for more indoor fly-through stuff, I just put that naked GoPro on top and I can get really good footage. And it's super solid at flying through tiny spaces. All right, so the only drone on this list that is a custom-built drone and isn't ready to fly is just another one that I just thought I would mention. I wasn't initially gonna put it on this list, but I just thought I would. And this drone is the Redkite XZWEI. I don't have any clue who's on the naming committee for this, but you should hire someone else. So this is basically a custom built drone that basically has the GoPro built into it. So it is a little bit more expensive, coming in at about $900 for the entire build fees and all the like parts and components, including the GoPro. But it's 250 grams with the GoPro on it. And this is what I use for all my professional concert flying. I might make a separate video about this drone, so if you do want to see that, let me know in the comments down below. But now let's get into bigger, more powerful drones. This right here is the Nazgul 5 Evoke from iFlight, and it comes in right at around $600. The Nazgul is a 5-inch FPV drone, which honestly is probably the most common FPV drone size. It's big enough to absolutely rip at 100 miles an hour, but it's not too big where you can't do any freestyle tricks or fly through buildings with it. But it is also big enough to carry a bit of a bigger battery and do some long-range mountain dives if you want. It's a great all-around FPV drone, and if you're maybe someone who already has a bunch of drone experience and knows you're gonna wanna get into FPV and get a more powerful drone, it's a great place to start. By the way, links to all of this stuff is down in the description. They are affiliate links, so I get a small kickback of each sale, and it would mean the world to me if you are already going to buy it if you'd use those links, just because it helps me make more videos like this. this. All right, next up we're getting into bigger, more long-range drones. A bigger drone, for one, because it has bigger propellers, is just more efficient in the air. And then two, just because it's bigger, you can put bigger batteries on there, giving you more flight time, giving you more range. The first one that I am gonna talk about is this Mcgee 7 from GepRC, which is a 7-inch FPV drone coming in right at $700. I've flown both the Chimera 7 and the Mcgee 7, and honestly, they handle pretty similarly. The reason that I have the Mcgee is because I crashed my Chimera into the ocean in Alaska, and it was really sad, RIP. But I've been testing out the Mcgee and been super, super impressed. What's nice about it is it's not quite as big as the Helion, so it's a lot easier to travel with. This thing is just huge and takes up a ton of luggage space, but you can still do massive long-range flights with this. It is perfect for ridgeline diving. I've taken this out to about 4.5 kilometers, which is more than enough range to basically do any mountain dive that you want. You sacrifice a little bit of freestyle performance, but it just cuts through the air so nicely and flies so well for these bigger, longer shots. So you're probably not gonna be hitting a bunch of tiny gaps and flips with this thing, but you're gonna be able to do amazing mountain diving, which in my opinion is the most fun part of FPV. And it's probably the drone that I use most because it's a good hybrid drone. Finally, I wanna talk about this absolute chungus here, which is the Helion 10. This drone was designed by my friend Ellis, who is an amazing FPV pilot, an amazing drone designer, and he basically set out to make the best long-range drone on the market. Because it's so big, you can just throw a massive battery on there. With lithium-ion batteries, I've gotten up to 20 minutes flight time on the thing. A couple days ago, I took it out to 6 kilometers away, got back and still had a ton of battery. I do have to mention though, early on when I got this drone, I did have some pretty bad jello and vibrations on the drone, which is essentially just makes your footage look kind of weird and have this funky thing. But I made some small adjustments and now it works perfectly. All the drones that are being sold now have that problem fixed. So if you're someone who knows that big long-range mountain diving is exactly what you want to do, this is your drone. So to wrap things up, which drone should you get? If you just want to start easy, get a drone that you can fly, not spend a lot of money and just see if you like it, go with the Beta FPV. If you're a brand new beginner and just don't want to deal with how confusing everything is, just get the Avata 2. This thing takes amazing videos, it flies for a really long time, it's super durable, it is just by far the best beginner setup on the market. You can buy it as a package deal with goggles and controller as well. And the best thing about it is it just flies, like any of the other DJI drones out there. If you've been watching video after video, spending days or weeks trying to figure out what to go with, just get the Avata 2. If you know you're gonna wanna be getting a drone that's more powerful, can carry a GoPro, and is pretty good at almost everything, go for the Nazgul 5. The Nazgul is great at a ton of different things. And if you think you're definitely someone interested in doing more long-range mountain diving, get either the Mcgee 7 or the Helion 10. If you've never had a long-range drone before, I'd probably recommend the Mcgee 7 just because it is really good at mountain diving, but you can also do other stuff with it so you don't have to fully commit to doing long range like you have to do pretty much with the Helion. And if you only care about doing long range, the Helion is your guy. And like I said, there are affiliate links down below, so if you guys are already going to buy any of these drones, it would just mean a ton if you use the links down below. And if you are interested in color grading your footage, exactly like I do, I'll leave a link to my LUT pack down below as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.